Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Bosch Legacy, Season 2, Episode 7. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with our dirty cops, that being Ellis and Long. This is the first episode that kind of officially gives them their names. Obviously, if you look at the X-ray, you kind of spoil it for yourself up until now, but either way. So what I think it's interesting about Ellis and Long, like Long in particular, because Long puts a lot of disrespect on Bosch's name. Ellis, I guess because maybe he's the older cop and he's a little more veteran, because he definitely seems like he's the brains of the operation, because he ends up kind of predicting a lot of stuff that happens later on with Bosch, where he's just like, yeah, like, oh, like Long's like, yeah, look, dude's still at his place. It's like, maybe he's laying low, and then Ellis is like, yeah, but maybe he found our tracker and he just wants us to think he stays in the same spot. The guy's actually really smart. It's that thing of like, man, if you weren't using your powers for evil, you'd be using it for extra good. But, because when they were doing that whole like operational sting, like with that prostitution sting, I was like, oh, I thought that was like 100% their side biz. And I didn't know if like the girl that Long was talking to, I didn't know if like she was someone they had set up, but it's like, no, they were actually doing their actual jobs in that moment. I was like, interesting. It's interesting like how there is some, I mean, I guess that's how they got into their business, is the overlap between, like, they basically take their day jobs as cops and what they do, and being a part, was it like Advice is the actual like department they belong to, but they kind of like took that and went to the more sinister side of how they apply their skills and their know-how and knowledge with their job and apply it to their side gig. So, but it's also interesting, once again, like Long constantly puts, it's like, oh, he's an old geezer. It's like, you look at like Bosch's career and what he's managed to do and accomplish, even in the later years of his career, you gotta put some respect on the guy's name, because you also say like, oh, he's an old geezer. This old geezer, you know, is still the one who put together, who's basically unraveling your whole operation, because no one's put anything together, but he's the one that started piecing a lot of the breadcrumbs together. The worst possible thing that could happen to you is, oh, David, who has a lawyer connection with Chandler, who has her own private eye, well, not own private eye, but she has a near and dear friend in Harry, well, frenemy in Harry Bosch. Well, no, I think they definitely moved past the frenemy phase. There's still some frenemy elements there, but they are full-blown friends. I don't think Bosch would ever admit that. I think Chandler would, but I don't think Bosch would ever. But it's like, yeah, like, unfortunately, he's, you know, and Bosch is a dog with a bone. Once he gets a whiff of something, he doesn't let it go, because it's all about truth and justice and getting, like, you know, getting to the heart of everything, you know, once again, because everyone matters or no one matters. And so we've, you know, and obviously there's all these connected murders, which he gets called in because, you know, the brothers that own that, was it pawn shop or whatever, that, or jewelry shop or whatever, that died. It's like, cool, he gets called in. Luckily, he knows Chandler. It's like, hey, I think I'm going to need a lawyer. So Chandler doesn't want too much information out there, because this doesn't want their investigation into the two brothers' death to interfere with her representing her client, that being David, and Bosch getting dragged up in all of this. Well, you know, it's like, because he works for Chandler, confidentiality like swings his way, so he is protected as well. He still tried, because he is, hey, your cop's just doing your job, so I'm gonna give you a little bit of a nugget. The fact of the matter is that he was kind of trying to give them a bone with what little that Chandler was allowing him to. Because, you know, he couldn't really tell them why he was fully there, because obviously this is connected to Lexi's murder and stuff like that. But once again, them investigating stuff could slow down or complicate their... It's like, our top priority is taking care of my client, David, and proving his innocence. We don't want to get murked up in there. Yes, it's all connected, but we don't want to get the waters muddied, jurisdiction-wise and all that stuff, when we've got them working the investigation, plus them probably trying to take it from Bosch, especially because, once again, he's a private investigator, not an actual cop, so I'm sure that would play an aspect to it all. What kind of surprised me in this episode was, obviously, Ellis broke into Bosch's house and found a photo of Maddie. Obviously, it was pretty big news, so they know who Maddie is. They're like, oh yeah, she was the cop that was kidnapped like 5 or 6 months ago. Once again, kind of giving you a better idea of just how much time frame is back. Because episode 4 was like, it had been 4 months since then by the time we got to episode 3, sorry. Once we got to episode 3, it had been basically about 4 months. So to know that it's already been like another month or two on top of that's kind of interesting. Once again, you never really get that and real, I think it's, you almost think the investigation stuff happens faster than it does, but it's like, I think it does take real time life wise, where it's just like, it's not going to be like wrapped up in a couple of days. It's like, no, like a good chunk of time ends up passing by in these episodes and you just they don't acknowledge it or really tell you, except for little moments like that. But they took such an interest in Maddie, and I was like, what are they going to do? Because they made such a point, like, all right, they let their commanding officer know their approach to taking down this like prostitution situation, but it was like, hey, let's get crew involved. Obviously, Maddie works with crew, so you're like, how are they going to implement? Like, I thought it was like, are they going to try and like blackmail Maddie to get the Bosch? Like, what's that? It turns out they were using Maddie to like, oh, we're one cop talking to another. Oh, your dad, I know who he is. Great detective. I'm not going to get so caught up on the him working dark side. Oh, he must be working the David investigation. He must not think David's innocent. Oh, I think he might be. How far has your father gotten along? And Maddie unintentionally ends up telling them a little bit. Granted, even she doesn't know everything because Bosch hasn't told her everything about the case. He did tell her about, like, she believes, like, oh, he was like, yeah, a witness heard 2 car doors shutting. So it's like, I know we're looking for 2 killers. And that's about, like, I think there might have been other bits, but, like, she still doesn't have enough. Even at this point, she doesn't know everything that Bosch knows because they haven't really talked about it in full details. But that was enough to kind of get Ellis along, like, oh, okay. Because they were reluctant to kill Bosch. That's the other element to this. They didn't want to go down that route. Regardless of it all, he's still a cop, and Ellis isn't too keen on that. Feels like Long is a little more willing to kind of pull the trigger on that situation, self-preservation and all that. But Ellis wanted to find other ways around it, so it's like try to impede his investigation. But once again, Bosch is a dog with a bone, and he won't let this go, and he keeps digging up more and more, and they're not too happy about that. So by the end of the episode, it does seem like we're going with the alternative, the last resort that we didn't want to go down, but it seems like we have no choice. It seems like they're willing to kill Bosch. Because he started following the trail from the place the watch that Lexi had that her husband was saying was getting fixed. That's why she didn't have it on. You found the guy who they bought it from. I think it was with them. It got to them, and then it got sold to the brother. I forgot the actual process of like who had it first. Was it the guy that Bosch came to visit about Lexi this episode, or was it the brothers? Like, I forgot who had it first, but it's all connected. And it turns out the guy who owns the watch, home dude, the guy had called to be like, okay, like, is it true that this was sold? The wife says that it was stolen, but in actuality, the husband sold it and all her jewelry, stole all her stuff and her jewelry just so he could get the insurance policy to pay off some debts. Now we know, so it's like, okay. So we know that Ellis and Long got their hands on it. Is that how that worked out? Did they get a cut of the insurance policy? Like, maybe he lied and told, like, maybe got, like, home dude was like, oh, I owe, like, gambling debts, but maybe he was most likely being blackmailed by Ellis and Long, so they probably had some dirt on him, so he took the insurance policy, because that was probably the only way he could make the money, and obviously we know they take jewelry, too, so maybe he gave it to them, and they were like, okay, we're going to take all this jewelry, and you'll get the insurance policy, and you're also going to give us a bit of that cash. Maybe, maybe not. Because Bosch tried to call the doctor, but the doctor was busy, so we'll have to wait to kind of find out on his front where that all ends up taking us. But immediately after that is kind of when Bosch ended up finding out the brothers he visited last episode are dead now. But he also ended up finding a recording of Lexi talking to someone. It might have been one of the brothers. I think it was one of the brothers because I think the name was like Paul. And so I think that it was one of the brothers. So she was like, right, me and my husband's a cop. There's no way we would buy stolen property. So Lexi was causing an issue. And so probably Paul probably him and his brother probably talked to Ellison Long about that, so they kind of had to nip that in the bud, because if Lexi went digging and it kind of drew up all the shady business they were doing, it would eventually lead back to Long and Ellis as well. So once again, it's all about self-preservation. Circling back to Maddie really quickly, she had this really nice, well, first and foremost, someone from, what was it, BSS? Essentially, I think it's kind of basically a in-house therapist, essentially. Basically, after her testimony during her victim impact statement, during Doc Waller's like sentencing or whatever, that it's like, right, she did admit that she wasn't sleeping well, wasn't focusing, but she's like, no, I'm okay, I'm good. It's like, well, we have to determine whether that's the case or not. But even Maddie later on is like, yeah, it's kind of like the easiest thing. It's like having the answers to having all the questions and answers beforehand, because it's like, and Paulina and Vasquez were basically talking about it, like, right, the department looks after the department. They don't want that complicated scandal. It would be scandal-ish. It would be complicated if they're like, hey, we have this cop that's not doing it. So it's like, kind of nudge them in the right direction to be like, say what they need to say officially that can make it so they get by with flying colors and they can still keep doing their job. Because Vasquez is like, the department's going to look after the department. They're going to do what's kind of in their best interest. And you still out there in the field, because the last thing they want is you being labeled like, okay, that you might need some time off, because that will be like on some official record, and it could be looked at as kind of a blight or a stain, which I don't think it should be. But it's like, that fits the narrative that Vasquez was saying of like, yeah, it's just the department looking after the department. But she's like, we look after each other, like we got each other's backs. And like Maddie's almost like about to break down, and she hugs Vasquez and Paulina, because for her it's like, oh, it's nice to have, these are the two people she has like by her side. These are her friends, her colleagues. She doesn't have like, and especially in this moment where it's like, with everything going on, especially what Paulina had said to her like last episode. Well, Paulina's always been there supporting her, but also Vasquez as well. And Vasquez even saying last episode, hey, like if you ever want to talk, I'm there. And she's like, I know. So I just thought that was kind of pretty neat. And just like I said, that vulnerable moment of her just kind of almost tearing up a little bit. And it's just kind of like, she's almost like, I don't know where that's coming from, but it's like, it's nice to have that support, knowing like no matter what, they've got her back. And I thought I think with everything that's going on, obviously, that's an important thing for Maddie to hear and know. We also catch up with our boy Anderson, who ended up getting leaked a subpoena that was meant for Chandler. We still don't know who leaked it to him. Not unless this is like some I doubt it. I was about to say, not unless this was some like 4D chess game that Chandler's playing, that she's the one that actually leaked it. Because the FBI agents later on, was it the two FBI agents that are investigating her and Bosch, is like, they were like, no, we didn't do that. Why would we? Because now it kind of screws up their case, because now the jurors, like 8 of them kind of backed out because they read the article talking about, oh, we're bringing the Bratva, the Russian mafia into this. No, I'm good. So they kind of scared people. So this could kind of end up restarting everything. So it feels like it could have been a Chandler move, but I'm like, who else would have the motivation to like, I mean, because Chandler was kind of trying to say like, hey, like someone's trying to besmirch my name, but I'm like, it feels like, well, we know her and Bosch talked about everything. Was that at the end? That might have been at the end of last episode, I want to say. At the end of episode 6, maybe. So maybe Bosch is the one that kind of suggested this, but I also could just be like, well, Chandler, it's her. Like after they talked everything through, once again, they were probably figuring out their next move. So this might have been Chandler's gambit. Maybe it was like she kind of got Bosch on board for it. I don't see who else could benefit from it, but I mean, maybe I'm just not thinking this the right way. Like I said, it just feels like a 4D chess move that Chandler might be playing, but I don't know. Because Anderson tried to get on top of this because he knew, like, right, Bosch was at the grand jury. He, like, came out, like, at the courthouse, and he was kind of basically pleading the fifth, you know. So it's like, right, let's get a statement from Chandler. But she was like, no. And he's like, oh, are you saying no as in you didn't testify? or like, no, you're not going to answer me, or no, that you did testify, but you pled the fifth. And she was just like, no, you could even say I refuse if you want to gussy it up a little bit. And because Anderson doing what he does as kind of like, I don't know, he's a guy just doing his job, but you also get that like sleaze factor to it. He's like, hey, I'm just trying to get your story out there before anyone else. But hey, if you want to do it, hey, I'm a guard. You can, in case you ever change your mind. So all these reporters are out in front of her place of like, oh, the Bratva, did you have anything to do with it? Obviously, the Carl Rogers of it all, and she's just like, someone's trying to besmirch my name. I'm not gonna let them. So we'll see how that continues to play out as the FBI continues their investigation. Caught a little peek of next episode. It seems like they are going to be questioning Maddie about Bosch, like where he was during some of the time frame for all the stuff last season, obviously. And since I brought up Maddie, really quickly circling back to like when she was at that sting operation with like Ellis and Long, and obviously she wasn't the only one. There was other members of crew involved. Now, what was interesting though is Maddie was a little bit of a witness to Ellis kind of being pretty rough to the guy, which she kind of had her own circumstance with that. Then also one of the other ladies is being arrested. And they're like, oh yeah, like, I didn't think about it at the time, but I'm gonna keep this in mind now that I'm thinking about it. They're like, oh yeah, we don't know about her involvement. It's like, well, we know that these bastards love to coerce people into doing stuff for them, as like James Allen was their CI, so they might be doing the same thing with that woman that Long was getting closer to as part of their operation. So that might be why they wanted to arrest her. They're kind of like, okay, we can use her for future like blackmail situations. That's the inkling I get. So it's like inadvertent. I mean, I think anyone else in that situation probably would have still done the same. But Ellis was kind of like, oh yeah, like what happened up there kind of stays between us, right? And Maddie's like, oh, it was a learning experience. It was educational. And she's got this, because like she's got her dad's instincts. So it's just, you could tell like something about it just didn't seem right, didn't sit right with her. So, because Pierce ended up giving Bosch the information related to Allen, the cops that were kind of connected. So Mo ended up running their files. The fact of the matter is they've been partners for like the past 6 years or something like that. They started somewhere else, then got to advice, but they became partners, and they've been partners for the past 6 years. He even had Mo come over to find the tracker because he couldn't find the tracker on his own, but Mo found it. So, because now him and Chandler are on the same page, because Chandler figured like something was kind of off, because a big motivation for Bosch this episode is he blames himself. Like, regardless of what their situation may have been, it's still the fact is I may have gotten 2 people killed because I wasn't, my head wasn't on a swivel. I mean, to be fair, it's like some like cops being involved in this and putting trackers on your car. Like you can't really be prepared for like everything. You would have no reason to be that paranoid. But yeah, he does blame himself that it's like these murders happen because of me, because I'm, he might interpret that as, oh, I lost a step, or, but like I said, I don't think you really could like be prepared for something like that. I mean, obviously they have a direct correlation and connection to that place, those 2 brothers. But I mean, to be fair, they went there specifically because they knew Bosch went there to talk to him. So it's like, okay, now we know for sure we have to kill them. Bosch, Chandler, and Mo are all on the same page now because he plays Lexi's recording that she had about Paul and the investigation she might have opened if he didn't hand over like these records or whatever, so she can like really know what's going on. And plus now it's like, okay, hey, these are the 2 cops who pulled me over. Oh, they set me up. They probably did look at my files. So now they're in the know. But the sad thing is that once again, Ellis saw through Bosch's deceit and ended up following him to Chandler's place, and then also followed him because they probably they're not tracking Mo's car, but they probably knew exactly. Well, they probably met at Chandler's place, not unless Mo ended up picking him up first. But yeah, they knew like what would be neutral ground for you to meet to talk about some stuff, and they were outside of Chandler's place, followed them to the jewelry store, and they ended up opening the safe and finding a CD that might have some information. As the brothers had an insurance policy, because well, Ellis and at least Ellis knew about the safe because he saw them close it because they one of them had made the point of, hey, it can only be open once a day, and he probably figured that, well, no one knows the combination, especially now that both of the brothers are dead, so there's no way of Bosch getting it open, but he has someone like Mo on his side who helped, so because I love that final scene, how it ties into the title of the episode. Was it Vin Scully? What was it? It was called "The Deuces Are Wild." It's the phrasing. Because basically he's like, anytime there would be two, like it was like he's like a, was it like a baseball person or something? But every time there was like a two related to anything, it was something sports related. As you know, I'm not the sports person, so like a lot of sports stuff just kind of goes over my head. But I love the thought of like, oh yeah, everything, like it's not everything happens in twos, but it's like when he starts realizing like things are happening in twos, like the number two keeps popping up all over the place, he'll say the phrase "deuces are wild," and now Bosch is like, yeah, there's a lot. Hey, there's these two dirty cops. There were two doors that were there were two doors that were closed when James Allen's body was dumped. There are these two murder cases, Lexi and James, that are connected. It's like twos all over the place. And it's like, yeah. And the literal title of the episode being like, I miss, was it Vince or Vic Scully? It is interesting and serendipitous how that two ends up being there ends up being so many twos involved in this particular investigation. I thought that was kind of a neat way of like being, the episode title and kind of feeding on this theme of the episode in that regard of just all these twos. We also had this other interesting little element to the episode, and I'm curious to see where it goes as well. I mean, there might be nothing more to it, but Marty, I guess, it's basically firing Matthew. I guess Matthew finally came clean to him. I don't know if it's a situation where Chandler told him about everything, and now Matthew's basically having to face the consequences, or what that's about. We don't really have the full consequences of it, but it was, and all you can see is Chandler. She has this look on her face where I think there's a part of her being like, it is what it is, but I think maybe there's also some part of her that kind of feels bad because yes, Matthew was like, used by the FBI, but it still doesn't change the fact is because even Marty's like, you should have come to me first. So I'm not quite sure. I can only assume the end fallout of that is just going to be Matthew losing his job, obviously, but it's like, I don't know. We'll have to see where that goes. I mean, where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Obviously, there's another episode out, so I'm excited to watch it and see where it all takes us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.